I wasn't supposed to feel this way. That's what I kept telling myself as I stood in front of the house, keys cold in my palm, staring at something that should have made me happy. A lake house. Quiet. Peaceful. The kind of place people dream about when they talk about retirement. And yet, all I felt was small. Happy birthday, Olivia. I murmured under my breath, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. 2 weeks ago, my son Ethan had thrown a lavish party for his wife's father. A catered dinner, live music, guests dressed like they were attending a gala. I saw the pictures online, couldn't avoid them, even if I tried. Everyone tagged, everyone smiling, Ethan at the center of it all, looking proud. He had bought that man a penthouse in the city. A penthouse. And today, on my 65th birthday, I got this. A house by the lake. Smaller. Quieter. Farther away. Not bad. Not at all. Just different. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The scent of fresh varnish and new furniture greeted me instantly, sharp and artificial, like something trying too hard to feel welcoming. The place was fully furnished. Modern, neat, carefully arranged. Whoever designed it had good taste. Neutral colors, soft lighting, large windows overlooking the water. It was beautiful, and yet it felt like a showroom, not a home. I walked slowly through the living room, my fingers brushing against the back of a sofa that had probably never been sat on. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Like it had been prepared for someone, but not really for me. On the kitchen counter, there was a note. I didn't want to read it, but I did. Mom, I know this place is quieter than what you're used to, but I think it's better for you. You deserve peace. I'll visit when I can. Ethan. That was it. No, I love you. No, I'm sorry I couldn't be there.
No explanation.
Just practical words. I folded the note slowly, carefully, as if it might fall apart if I moved too fast. Better for you, I repeated. Since when did he decide what was better for me? I moved toward the window, looking out at the lake. The water stretched endlessly, calm and silent, reflecting the fading light of the afternoon sky. It was beautiful in a lonely kind of way. And suddenly, memories began to creep in uninvited. Ethan at 7, clinging to my hand on his first day of school, terrified I might leave him there forever. Ethan at 12, crying because he didn't make the soccer team, and me telling him that failure didn't define him. Ethan at 18, promising me he'd never forget everything I'd done for him. I had believed him. God, I had believed him. I sank into one of the chairs, my body heavier than it should have been, as if the years had suddenly caught up with me all at once. Raising Ethan alone hadn't been easy. His father left when he was 3. No explanations, no goodbye, just absence. So I became everything. Mother, father, provider, protector. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it took. There were years I barely slept, years I survived on cheap meals just to make sure he had everything he needed.
And he did.
Good schools, clean clothes, opportunities one never had. I told myself it was worth it, because one day he'd remember. Wouldn't he? I pulled my phone out of my bag and scrolled through our messages.
Short. Distant.
Busy. Can't talk now. Maybe next week. Always next week. But next week never came. I closed my eyes for a moment, pressing my fingers against my temples. Maybe I was being unfair. Maybe this was his way of caring. The house. The quiet. The distance. Maybe he thought I needed this. Maybe he thought I was tired.
Old.
In the way. The thought settled heavily in my chest. I stood up again and walked outside. The air was cooler now, the breeze carrying the scent of water and trees. The lake stretched out in front of me, endless and indifferent. No neighbors nearby.
No noise.
No life. Just silence. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how alone I was. "This is fine," I whispered. It wasn't. Something about this didn't sit right. Ethan had always been thoughtful, careful. Even when he was busy, even when life pulled him in different directions, he never disappeared like this. And this house, it felt less like a gift and more like a decision. A decision made without me.
A decision about me.
I turned back toward the house, my gaze drifting to the side yard. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. Just grass, a narrow path, a small storage shed near the back. But then something caught my eye, a patch of ground, uneven, recently disturbed. I frowned slightly, stepping closer. The soil there was darker, looser, as if it had been dug up not long ago. My heart gave a small, unexpected jolt. "Probably nothing," I muttered. And yet, I couldn't look away. A strange feeling settled over me, quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. Like a question I hadn't asked yet, like something waiting.
Buried.
I took a step closer, then another. And for the first time since I arrived, I felt something stronger than sadness.
Curiosity.
And something else. Something sharper. Something that whispered, "You don't know everything yet." I didn't plan to dig. That's what I told myself later, over and over again, as if repeating it could somehow make it true. But the moment I saw that patch of disturbed earth, something inside me shifted, quietly but permanently. It wasn't just curiosity. It was instinct, the kind you don't question because it feels older than logic, older than fear. The ground looked wrong, too fresh, too deliberate. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it, trying to convince myself to walk away. I had just arrived. I was tired, emotional. It had been a long day, a long year, a long life. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe it was nothing more than landscaping. But then again, Ethan never did anything without a reason. I turned toward the shed. It was small, tucked behind the house like an afterthought. The door creaked when I opened it, revealing a few tools neatly arranged on the wall, too neatly, almost staged. A shovel stood in the corner, clean except for a thin line of dried soil near the blade. That was enough. I grabbed it before I could change my mind. The evening air had grown colder, but I barely noticed as I stepped back to the patch of earth. My hands tightened around the handle, my pulse picking up in a way that made no sense. It was just dirt,
Just a backyard.
just a house my son had given me. So why did it feel like I was about to uncover something I wasn't meant to see? The first thrust of the shovel broke the surface easily. Too easily. The soil was soft, recently turned, not compacted the way untouched ground should be. I dug again, and again, each movement quicker than the last, my breath growing uneven. The sound of metal slicing into earth echoed louder than it should have in the quiet. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time felt strange, stretched thin. Then the shovel hit something. A dull, hollow sound. I froze. For a second, I didn't move at all. My hands tightened. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat.
No, iwis parat.
It's nothing. But I already knew it wasn't nothing. I dropped to my knees and brushed the dirt away with my hands, ignoring the cold, ignoring the tremor that had started in my fingers. Slowly, the shape beneath the soil began to reveal itself. A box. Not large, not small, just deliberate. It was wrapped in thick plastic, sealed tight, protected from moisture. Whoever had buried it wanted it preserved. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it. I hesitated. This was the moment where I could stop, walk away, pretend I hadn't seen any of this, go back inside, make some tea, sit by the window, and live the quiet life Ethan had chosen for me. but I didn't move. Because deep down, I already understood something terrifying. This wasn't random. This wasn't forgotten. This was meant to be hidden. And somehow, I was meant to find it. I pulled the box out of the ground with shaking hands and carried it inside, leaving the door open behind me. The house felt different now.
Smaller. Tighter.
Like the walls were watching. I placed the box on the kitchen table and stared at it. Think, I muttered. Why would Ethan bury something here? Why not throw it away? Why not keep it somewhere safer? Unless, he thought no one would look. No one would question it. No one would dig. Because no one expected me to. The thought sent a cold wave through my chest. I reached for a knife in the drawer and carefully cut through the plastic. My hands weren't steady anymore, and I had to stop twice just to breathe. Inside was a plain metal box.
Locked.
Of course it was. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course, I whispered. For a moment, I considered stopping again. But that feeling, that same quiet insistence, pushed me forward. I wasn't just curious anymore. I needed to know. I searched the drawers, the cabinets, the entire kitchen, until I found a small toolkit tucked beneath the sink. It took longer than I expected, my hands clumsy with nerves, but eventually the lock gave way with a sharp click that echoed louder than it should have. I opened the box slowly, and everything changed. Inside were documents.
Stacks of them.
Neatly organized.
Too neatly.
I pulled out the first folder, my eyes scanning the page without fully understanding what I was looking at. Legal language. Numbers.
Dates.
Then something familiar caught my attention.
A name. Mine.
Olivia. My breath stopped. I flipped through the pages faster now, my eyes racing, my mind trying to catch up. Accounts. Transactions. Transfers. Large ones. Very large ones. My stomach dropped. No, that's not possible.
But it was.
Because I recognized the source. A life insurance policy. My husband's. The one I had been told never existed. The one Ethan had said wasn't there. My hands started shaking violently now as I pulled out more documents, more evidence, more pieces of a story I had never been told. The policy had been real. Very real. And not just that. It had been paid out. Years ago. A large sum. More than enough to change everything. More than enough to give me security. Freedom. A different life. But I never saw a single cent. Because it hadn't gone to me. It had gone to Ethan. I staggered back slightly, gripping the edge of the table as the room tilted around me.
No. My voice broke this time.
This can't be right. But the signatures were there.
Mine.
Or something that looked like mine. Authorization forms. Transfer approvals. Legal permissions. All supposedly signed by me. But I had never signed them. Never even seen them. Which meant only one thing. My son hadn't just lied to me. He had forged my name. The realization hit like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All those years. All those struggles. All the nights I lay awake worrying about bills, about medical expenses, about how I was going to survive. It had all been unnecessary, because the money had been there, the entire time, and Ethan had known. He had watched me struggle, watched me work myself to exhaustion, watched me apologize for needing help, all while living a life funded by what was supposed to be mine. I sank into the chair, my legs no longer able to hold me. The silence of the house felt different now. Heavier. Darker. Like it was closing in. I grabbed another document, forcing myself to keep going, even though every instinct screamed at me to stop. Investment reports. Account summaries.
Growth over time.
The money hadn't just been taken. It had been used, expanded, multiplied, and then spent. I saw purchases I recognized. Things I had seen in photos. A luxury car, vacations, school payments, a house. Not this one. A better one. A bigger one. For someone else. A slow, burning anger began to rise inside me, cutting through the shock, the disbelief, the pain. This house, this quiet, isolated place. It wasn't a gift. It was a solution. A way to keep me out of sight. Out of the way. A place where I wouldn't ask questions. Because I wasn't supposed to know. But I did know. Now I knew everything. And the most terrifying part wasn't the money. It wasn't the lies. It was how long this had been happening. Years. Years of manipulation. Years of control. Years of being made to feel small, dependent, grateful for scraps. And I had believed it. I had believed him. I looked around the room again, seeing it clearly for the first time. Not a home. A cage. Neatly decorated. Comfortably disguised. But still a cage. My phone lay on the counter, silent. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I picked it up. My hands were steady now. Too steady. Because something inside me had changed. Something final. Something irreversible. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't unsure. And I wasn't afraid. For the first time in years. I was angry. And I knew exactly who deserved it. I didn't call him. That was the first decision I made after everything settled into place inside my mind, after the shock stopped crashing over me in waves and turned into something colder, sharper, more precise. I could have called Ethan right then, demanded answers, screamed, cried, begged for some explanation that would make this make sense, but I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew there was no explanation that could undo what I had just discovered. There are mistakes, and then there are choices. And this had been a choice. Many choices. Repeated, calculated, sustained over years. So instead of calling him, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the documents, and read every single page. It took hours. By the time I finished, the sun had set, and the house was swallowed by darkness, but I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there, letting the truth settle into my bones. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every lie neatly recorded in black and white. There were notes too, emails printed out, correspondence between Ethan and financial advisors, explanations written in a tone that made my stomach twist. She's not financially stable enough to manage large sums. We're keeping it protected long term. It's for her own good. For my own good. I almost laughed. Instead, I reached for my phone and finally turned it on. It lit up immediately. Missed calls. Dozens. All from Ethan. My thumb hovered over the screen as I scrolled. 12 missed calls. Then 18. Then 27. Voicemails stacked on top of each other, one after another, like a trail of desperation I hadn't expected. I frowned slightly. That wasn't like him. Ethan didn't call like this. Ethan barely called at all. Something had changed. I pressed play on the first voicemail. Mom, hey, just checking in. Call me when you get this. Normal. The second one came an hour later. Hey, just wanted to make sure you got settled and okay. Let me know. Still normal. But by the fifth message, his tone shifted. Mom, where are you? I tried calling earlier. Please call me back. By the 10th, there was something else in his voice. Tension. Mom, I need to talk to you. It's important. And by the 15th, Mom, please pick up. I'm starting to worry. I stopped the playback. Worry? That word sat strangely in my mind. For years, he hadn't worried. Not when I struggled with bills. Not when I mentioned my health. Not when I sat alone on birthdays, holidays, ordinary days that passed without a single call. But now he was worried. I leaned back in the chair slowly, my eyes drifting to the documents spread across the table. He knew. That was the only explanation. Somehow, he knew I had found out. The realization didn't scare me. It steadied me, because now I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about what he had done. It was about what he was afraid of. I pressed play again, skipping forward. Mom, I came by the house earlier and your car wasn't there. Where did you go? That made me pause. He had gone to my old house, which meant he hadn't expected me to stay here quietly. He hadn't expected me to act. A slow, almost unfamiliar feeling spread through my chest. Control. For years, I had been reacting to his life, his decisions, his distance. Now, for the first time, he was reacting to me. I played the last voicemail. Mom, please. Just call me back. We need to talk. I'm coming over. I set the phone down carefully. So that was it. He was coming.
Good.
I stood up and began gathering the documents, organizing them into a neat stack, my movements calm, deliberate. There was no panic left in me.
No confusión.
Just clarity. He thought he could explain this. He thought there was something he could say that would fix it. He thought I was still the same woman who would accept whatever version of the truth he offered. He was wrong. I moved through the house slowly, turning on the lights one by one. The space felt different now, not smaller, not colder, but clearer. Like I could finally see it for what it really was. Not a gift. A strategy. A place to put me where I wouldn't interfere. A place where I would stay quiet. But I wasn't quiet anymore. Headlights flashed through the window. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I simply walked to the door and waited. A car door slammed outside. Then another. Voices.
2 of them.
Of course. Ethan wasn't alone. I opened the door before they could knock. He stood there, slightly out of breath, his expression tight, controlled in a way that told me he was trying very hard not to lose it. And beside him,
Lily, his wife.
perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, her eyes scanning me quickly, assessing, calculating. Mom, Ethan said, stepping forward immediately. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all day. His voice was urgent, almost frantic. I stepped aside slightly, but didn't invite them in. I was busy, I said simply. The word hung there between us.
Busy.
His own word, used against him. He flinched just slightly. Good. Lily crossed her arms, her expression tightening. We were worried. You weren't answering your phone. Were you? I asked calmly. The question caught them off guard. Ethan frowned. Of course we were. I tilted my head slightly. That's interesting. You haven't been worried in years. Silence. Real silence this time. Not awkward. Not uncertain. Heavy. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Mom, can we just come inside and talk? I studied him for a moment. This man. This stranger. This person who shared my son's face, but none of his warmth. Then I stepped back and let them in. He moved quickly, his eyes immediately scanning the room, just like I had earlier, but for a very different reason. Lily followed, slower, more controlled, but I caught the brief flicker of something in her expression.
Fear.
They both felt it. They just hid it differently. Mom, Ethan started, turning toward me. There's something we need to clear up. I agree, I said. I walked past them and sat down at the table, right next to the stack of documents. I didn't touch them. I didn't need to.
They saw them.
And everything changed. Ethan's entire body went still. Lily's breath caught, just barely. There it was. Confirmation. You found something, Ethan said carefully. Not a question. A statement. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Yes, I said quietly. I did. And for the first time, since he walked in, he didn't have control of the conversation. Ethan didn't sit down. He stayed standing across from me, as if keeping his distance might somehow protect him, or maybe give him time to think, to rearrange the situation in his favor the way he always had. Lily moved more carefully, choosing a chair to the side, not too close to me, not too far from him, positioning herself like someone who had done this before, controlled conversations, uncomfortable confrontations, situations where appearances mattered more than truth. I rested my hands on the table, right beside the stack of documents, and waited. Silence stretched. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. I wanted him to speak first.
And he did.
Mom, he began slowly, his voice measured. Whatever you think you found, I can explain it. Of course he could. He had been explaining things for years, rewriting reality, adjusting details, reshaping facts until they became something easier to accept. I nodded slightly. Go ahead. That was all I said.
No accusations. No anger.
Just permission. And somehow, that made him more uncomfortable than if I had shouted. He hesitated, just for a second, then stepped closer to the table, his eyes flicking down to the papers and back to me. The insurance policy. I didn't tell you about it because you weren't in a place to handle it at the time. You were grieving. You were overwhelmed. I was trying to protect you. Protect me. The word landed softly, but it didn't stay soft.
It twisted.
It echoed. It hollowed itself out from the inside. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Protect me from what? He exhaled, like I was making this harder than it needed to be. From making bad decisions. From being taken advantage of. It was a lot of money, Mom. You've never dealt with that kind of responsibility before. There it was. Not concern. Not care. Control. Lily finally spoke, her voice smooth, almost soothing. Olivia, you have to understand, Ethan was under a lot of pressure back then. He was trying to do what was best for everyone. Everyone.
Not me.
Everyone. I turned my head slightly and looked at her. Was it best for me to work 2 jobs at 60? Her smile faltered. Just a little. That was your choice, she said carefully. My choice. I let that sit for a moment, letting the weight of it settle into the room. Then I reached forward and picked up one of the documents, sliding it across the table toward Ethan. My choice. I repeated quietly. Or the result of a lie? He didn't touch the paper.
Didn't need to.
He knew exactly what it was. The forged authorization. My name, written in a way that looked almost right, but not quite. Close enough to pass. Close enough to steal. His jaw tightened. Mom. No, I interrupted, still calm. Let's not skip that part. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't controlled. It was cracking. I tapped the document lightly. Did I sign this? He didn't answer. Did I ever tell you to manage that money for me? Still nothing. Did I even know it existed? His eyes dropped. And that was the answer. I nodded slowly, as if confirming something I had already accepted. So, let's not call it protection. Lily shifted in her seat. You're focusing on the wrong thing. The money wasn't wasted. It was invested. It grew. You're actually in a better position now than you would have been if I had access to my own money. I finished. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan stepped in quickly. Mom, listen. Yes, I used some of it, but it wasn't theft.
It was temporary.
I always planned to return it. I was building something. For all of us. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. For all of us, I repeated. Yes, he said more firmly now, gaining confidence as he spoke. Everything I've done has been for the family. The house, the investments, the kids' education, it's all part of a bigger plan. You'll benefit from it too. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had convinced himself of his own version of the truth. This man who believed that if he said something enough times, it became justified. And when exactly was I supposed to benefit? I asked quietly. He opened his mouth, then closed it, because there was no answer, because there had never been a plan for me, only a plan around me. Lily leaned forward slightly, her tone sharper now, less polished. You're making this sound worse than it is. You weren't suffering. You had a place to live. You had support when you needed it. Support. I felt something inside me tighten, not explode, not break, just tighten, like something locking into place. I had to ask for money, I said. From my own son, while he was using my money to fund his life. That's not fair, Ethan snapped, his composure finally slipping. You're acting like I did this out of greed. I didn't. I did it because you wouldn't have known what to do with that kind of money. There it was. The truth.
Raw.
Unfiltered. Finally. I leaned forward slightly, meeting his eyes. And you would. He hesitated. Just for a second. But I saw it. That flicker. That doubt.
And it was enough.
Tell me something, I continued, my voice still steady, still controlled. When I told you I couldn't afford my medication last year, did you think about this money? He looked away. When I skipped doctor appointments because I didn't have enough, did you think about this money? His silence grew heavier. When I apologized to you for being a burden, did you think about this money? Stop, he said quietly. But I didn't. Did you think about it when you bought that car? I asked. Or when you paid for private school? Or when you told your friends how hard you worked for everything you had? Mom, stop, he snapped louder now. But I was already standing. And now I wasn't just calm. Now I was clear. You didn't protect me, I said. You controlled me. The words didn't echo. They landed. Hard. Final. Lily stood up too, her patience gone. This is getting ridiculous. We came here to fix this, not to be attacked. Fix this. I repeated, almost softly.
How?
Neither of them answered, because there was no fixing it. Not with words. Not with excuses. Not with carefully constructed explanations that only worked as long as I didn't know the truth. I looked at both of them. Really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see family. I saw strangers. People who had built a version of reality where I didn't matter, where I was a problem to manage, a detail to control, a voice to ignore, and something inside me, something old, something tired, finally let go. You should leave, I said. Ethan blinked. Mom, you should leave, I repeated. This time, there was no softness in it.
No hesitation.
Just truth. He stared at me, searching for something, maybe doubt, maybe weakness, maybe the version of me he was used to. But she wasn't there anymore. And he saw that. Slowly, painfully. He nodded. Lily didn't argue this time. They walked toward the door in silence. And just before he stepped outside, Ethan turned back. We can still work this out, he said. I met his eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like his mother. I felt like myself. No, I said. And I closed the door. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. Earlier, the silence had felt empty, like something missing, like I was waiting for a life that wasn't coming back. Now it felt settled. Not peaceful, not yet, but grounded, as if something had finally stopped pretending. I stood by the door for a moment after Ethan and Lily left, my hand still resting against the wood, feeling the faint vibration of their departure as their car disappeared down the road. I didn't rush to the window to watch them go. I didn't need to. That part of my life had already walked out long before night. I turned back toward the kitchen slowly. The documents were still there, exactly where I left them, unchanged, undeniable. For a second, I just looked at them, letting the reality settle again, not because I doubted it, but because accepting something like this doesn't happen all at once. It happens in layers. And with each layer, something else breaks. Or maybe something else frees itself. I sat down again, but this time I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt focused. That surprised me. I had expected anger to take over, or grief, or something louder. But instead, what I felt was clarity. And clarity doesn't shout. It just stays. I reached for my phone and picked it up. No new calls. No messages. For once, the silence on the screen matched the silence in the house.
Good.
I opened the contacts list and stared at Ethan's name. For years, that name had carried weight, emotion,
History.
obligation. Now it looked ordinary, just a name. My thumb hovered over it for a moment. Then I deleted it.
No hesitación.
No second thoughts. Just one quiet, irreversible action. The screen refreshed, and his name was gone. I exhaled slowly, not realizing I had been holding my breath. That was the first step. Not revenge, not punishment, just distance. I set the phone down and stood up, moving toward the living room. The large window reflected my silhouette back at me, and for a moment, I stopped. I looked different, not physically, but something in my posture had changed. Something in the way I stood. Straighter. Still. Present. I walked outside again, the cool night air brushing against my skin. The disturbed patch of earth was still there, the hole partially filled where I had pulled the box out. It looked smaller now, less significant, because what it held was no longer hidden. I didn't bother covering it up. Let it stay. Let it show. I turned my gaze toward the lake, the surface dark and still under the night sky. There was no movement, no sound, just a wide stretch of quiet that felt endless. For the first time since arriving, I didn't feel swallowed by it. I felt separate from it. That mattered. I went back inside and locked the door, not out of fear, but out of intention. This space was mine now. Not because Ethan gave it to me, but because I chose to stay in it, at least for now. Back in the kitchen, I gathered the documents again, this time stacking them neatly, aligning the edges with care. Each page felt heavier than paper, heavier than ink. They were evidence, yes, but more than that, they were truth. And truth, once seen, doesn't disappear. I needed to do something with them. Not tomorrow. Not eventually.
Soon.
I walked into the bedroom and found a small desk near the window. It had probably been placed there for decoration, something to make the room feel complete. Now, it had a purpose. I sat down and began making a list. It felt strange at first. I hadn't made plans for myself in years, not real ones. My life had been reactive, shaped around what I could afford, what I had to do, what I needed to survive. Now, for the first time, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was thinking about action. Step 1. Understand everything. Not just what I had read, but what it meant legally, financially, practically. Step 2. Find someone who could help.
Not Ethan.
Never Ethan. Someone else. Someone who didn't see me as a problem to manage. Someone who would treat me like I had a voice. Step 3. I paused. My pen hovered over the page. What did I want step 3 to be? For a long time, I didn't write anything. Because the truth was I didn't know yet. And for once, that was okay. I set the pen down and leaned back in the chair, staring out at the dark outline of the trees beyond the window. My mind drifted, not into memories this time, but into something quieter.
Possibility.
That word felt unfamiliar, uncomfortable, but also real. The past couldn't be undone. The years weren't coming back. The trust wasn't rebuilding itself overnight. But the future wasn't decided yet. And that meant something. A small sound broke the silence. My phone. I turned my head slowly and looked at it on the desk. It lit up. Unknown number. I stared at it for a few seconds. Then it stopped. Silence again. A moment later, it rang again. Same number. Persistent. I didn't pick it up. Not yet. Instead, I watched it. Let it ring. Let it exist without controlling me. Eventually, it stopped again. This time, a message followed. I reached for the phone and opened it. No name. Just text. Olivia, we need to talk. This can still be resolved. Please don't make any decisions yet. I read it twice. Then I smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but knowingly. Because now I understood something clearly. They were afraid, not of losing me, but of losing control. I set the phone down again without replying. For years, I had responded immediately, answered quickly, adjusted myself to fit their timing, their needs, their expectations. Not anymore.
Now.
They could wait. I stood up, turned off the light, and walked toward the bed. My body was tired, but my mind was steady. As I lay down, staring at the ceiling, I expected the thoughts to come rushing back. The anger,
The pain.
the betrayal. But instead, there was quiet. Real quiet. Not empty. Not lonely. Just space. And in that space, something new was beginning. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Not even close. But something stronger. Something that didn't depend on them. Something that didn't ask for permission. Something that had been buried for a long time and was finally rising back to the surface. I closed my eyes slowly. Tomorrow I would start. Not reacting.
Not asking.
Not waiting. But deciding. For myself. And that, more than anything, changed everything. I woke up before sunrise. Not because I had to. Not because of stress or habit or the old rhythm of survival that used to pull me out of bed before my body was ready. This time it was different. I woke up because my mind was already moving.
Clear.
Focused. Decided. For a few seconds, I lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet of the house.
No noise.
No pressure. No expectations waiting on the other side of the day. Just space. And for the first time in years, that space didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. I sat up slowly, letting my feet touch the floor, grounding myself in something simple, something real. Yesterday had changed everything, but today was about action. No more thinking in circles. No more asking why. I already knew why. Now, it was time to decide what to do with it. I dressed without rushing, choosing clothes not out of necessity, but out of intention. That alone felt strange. There had been a time when every decision revolved around practicality, what lasted longer, what cost less, what I could justify. Today, I didn't justify anything. I just chose. In the kitchen, I made coffee and stood by the window while it brewed, watching the early light stretch across the lake. The world outside was waking up slowly, unaware of what had shifted inside me. That was fine. Not everything needed to be visible. I sat at the table with my notebook and the stack of documents, flipping through them again, not because I needed to reread them, but because I needed to understand them differently now. Yesterday, they were shock.
Proof.
Betrayal. Today, they were leverage. That word settled into my mind quietly. Leverage. For years, I had none. Now I had everything. I reached for my phone and opened the message from the unknown number again. Olivia, we need to talk. This can still be resolved. I studied it carefully. Not the words themselves, but what they meant. They weren't asking. They were trying to contain, trying to stop something before it started, which meant I had already disrupted more than they expected.
Good.
I deleted the message. Then I opened my browser. Searching felt different now. Not confused, not desperate. Directed. Specific. I didn't look for answers to emotional questions. I looked for facts. Legal terms.
Rights.
Processes. What happens when someone forges a signature? What happens when money is taken under false authority? What happens when trust is used as a weapon? The words were clinical,
Precise.
but behind them, I could see the shape of something real. Accountability. I read for over an hour, taking notes, underlining points, building something I hadn't had before. Understanding. By the time I finished, one thing was clear. What Ethan had done wasn't just wrong. It wasn't just personal. It was illegal. The realization didn't shock me this time. It settled. Because now it wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about consequence. I closed the notebook and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling again, but this time with a different kind of stillness. There was only one next step. Not confrontation. Not negotiation. Not another conversation where he tried to reshape reality.
No.
Something else. Someone else. I stood up, gathered the documents into a folder, and grabbed my keys. The drive into town was quiet. The road stretched ahead of me, lined with trees that filtered the morning light into soft, shifting patterns. A few days ago, I would have noticed how isolated it felt. Now I noticed something else. Distance. And distance, I was beginning to understand, could be protection. The town itself was small but alive. Cafes opening, people moving, the normal rhythm of a place that had nothing to do with my past. That mattered more than I expected. I parked near a row of offices and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the building in front of me. I hadn't called ahead. I hadn't made an appointment. Because if I waited, I might hesitate. And hesitation was something I had done for too many years. So I got out. Inside, the office was quiet, professional, neutral. A reception desk, a few chairs, soft lighting designed to make people feel comfortable. I didn't need comfort. I needed clarity. The woman at the front desk looked up and smiled politely. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I need to speak with someone about a financial matter." She nodded, professional, efficient. "Do you have an appointment?"
No.
A brief pause. Then she studied me for a moment, not dismissively, not skeptically, just assessing. "That's all right," she said finally. "Let me see who's available." I sat down and waited. This kind of waiting was different. Not passive. Not helpless. Intentional. A few minutes later, a door opened. "Olivia?" I stood. A man in his late 40s stood in the doorway, calm, composed, observant in a way that told me he paid attention to details. "Come in," he said. His office was simple.
Organized. No unnecessary decorations.
Just space, a desk and 2 chairs. I sat down across from him and placed the folder on the table. "I don't need advice yet," I said. "I need you to look at this." He didn't interrupt, didn't question. He just opened the folder and started reading. The room stayed quiet. Minutes passed, then more. His expression didn't change much, but I saw it, the subtle shift, the tightening around the eyes, the slight pause between pages. Recognition. Understanding. When he finally looked up, the air in the room had changed. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "My house," I said. He held my gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You understand what this is, right?" "Yes," I said. And I did. Not completely. Not in every legal detail, but enough. Enough to know this wasn't something small. He leaned back slightly, folding his hands. "This isn't just a family issue. I know. This involves fraud. I know. And if everything here is accurate," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "this is serious." I felt something settle deeper inside me. Not fear. Confirmation. "That's why I'm here," I said. Silence followed. But not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that comes before something important is decided. He nodded once more. "All right," he said. Then let's talk about what happens next. And for the first time, I wasn't being guided. I wasn't being managed. I wasn't being protected. I was being taken seriously. As I sat there listening, asking questions, understanding the path in front of me, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about getting my life back. This was about something bigger. Something final. Something that couldn't be undone once it started. And as I walked out of that office later, the folder lighter in my hands but heavier in meaning, I realized something important. This wasn't the moment everything changed. That had already happened. This was the moment I chose what to do about it. The paperwork didn't take long to start moving. That was the first thing I noticed. I had expected delays, complications, time to stretch endlessly the way it always seems to when you need something to happen. But this was different. Once everything was in motion, it moved with a quiet efficiency that felt almost unreal, like something had been waiting for the right moment to unfold. And maybe it had. I spent the next few days in a strange kind of calm. Not peaceful, not relaxed, but steady. Like standing in the center of something you know will expand outward, even if you can't see the full shape of it yet. The calls didn't stop. If anything, they increased.
Different numbers now.
Not just Ethan. Not just Lily. Unknown numbers. Voicemails left in carefully controlled tones that try to sound reasonable, concerned, cooperative. Olivia, we should talk before this escalates. There's still time to resolve this privately. Legal action isn't necessary. I listened to a few of them, then I stopped. Because they all said the same thing in different words. Don't go forward. Don't expose this. Don't take control. That told me everything I needed to know.
So, I didn't respond.
Not once. Silence, I was learning, could be more powerful than any argument. By the end of the week, the tone changed. The calm voices disappeared. What replaced them was something sharper. More urgent. More real. The first real sign came early one morning when I opened my phone and saw a message, not from an unknown number this time. From Ethan. I had deleted his contact, but I still recognized the number instantly. Mom, please. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Too far. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I set the phone down without replying. Because this wasn't something that had suddenly gone too far. It had gone too far years ago. I was just the last one to see it. Later that same day, there was another message. This time from Lily. Think about what you're doing. This will affect everyone. The kids don't deserve this. I almost smiled. Because now they were reaching for something else.
Guilt.
The one tool that had always worked before. The one thing that had kept me quiet, compliant, manageable. But something had changed. I read the message again. Then I deleted it.
No hesitation.
No response.
No guilt.
That part of me, the one that bent, that adjusted, that absorbed everything so no one else had to feel uncomfortable,
was gone.
And they were just starting to realize it. By the third day, the shift became visible. Not just in messages. In reality. I was in the kitchen when my phone rang again. I almost ignored it out of habit, but something made me pick it up. Hello. There was a pause. Then Ethan's voice. Not controlled. Not composed.
Raw.
Mom, what are you doing? I leaned against the counter, my grip on the phone steady. Living my life. That's not what I mean, he said quickly. You filed something.
I got notified this morning.
Lawyers, accounts, everything's being reviewed. What is this? So it had started. Not quietly.
Not slowly.
But exactly the way it was supposed to. It's the truth, I said. A sharp exhale on the other end. Mom, listen to me. You don't understand how serious this is. I closed my eyes for a second, not out of weakness, but out of clarity. I understand it perfectly.
No, you don't, he snapped.
This isn't just about you. This affects everything. My business, my accounts, everything is frozen. Do you have any idea what that means?
Yes, I did.
But I let him keep talking. This isn't how you fix things, he continued, his voice rising. We could have worked this out. I told you that. I was going to fix it. When? I asked quietly. Silence. Just for a second. But it was enough. When were you going to fix it, Ethan? I repeated. I just needed time. You had years. His breathing grew heavier. That's not fair. No, I said calmly. It's accurate. Another silence. Longer this time. Then his voice dropped, shifting again, softer, more controlled, but not calm. Never calm. You're going to destroy everything. The words hung there, heavy, intentional,
Designed to land.
and for a brief moment, they almost did. Not because they were true, but because they were familiar. That old feeling, responsibility, the idea that I was somehow the cause of everything falling apart. That if something broke, it was because I didn't hold it together. I let that feeling pass. Just like I had learned to let everything else pass. And then I answered. No, I said. You did that. Silence again. But this time, it didn't feel uncertain. It felt final. You're my mother, he said, his voice quieter now. How can you do this to me? That question, that exact question, it would have broken me once. But now I understood it. It wasn't a question. It was an expectation. The expectation that I would choose him over myself. That I would absorb the damage, so he didn't have to feel it. That I would stay in the role he had built for me. But that role didn't exist anymore. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm responding to what you did. He didn't answer, because there was no response to that. Not one that worked. Not one that rewrote the truth. You could still stop this, he said finally. We can fix it. I'll return the money. We'll make it right. I almost asked him if he hurt himself, but I didn't, because it didn't matter. You had your chance, I said. And then I ended the call. I didn't wait for him to respond. I didn't give him space to argue. I simply chose to stop. The silence after that felt different. Not heavy. Not uncertain. Complete. I set the phone down and stood there for a moment, letting everything settle. Outside, the lake was still. Inside, the house was quiet. And somewhere beyond all of that, things were already changing. Accounts being reviewed, records being traced, stories unraveling. The life Ethan had built was starting to crack. And for the first time, I wasn't standing inside it. I was watching it from the outside. That evening, I sat on the porch again. The air cooler now, the sky dimming slowly into night. The same place I had stood days ago, feeling lost, uncertain, displaced. Now, I felt something else. Not victory, not satisfaction, just alignment. Like everything had finally shifted into its true position. The truth was no longer hidden. The roles were no longer confused. And the silence was no longer empty. It was mine. 6 months changed everything. Not overnight. Not in some dramatic, cinematic way where everything collapses at once and rebuilds just as quickly. It was slower than that. More deliberate. Like watching something carefully constructed come apart piece by piece until there's nothing left to hold it together. And in that space, something new begins. I stood in the kitchen of my new home, sunlight spilling across the floor, warm and steady, the kind of light that doesn't rush or fade too quickly. It stayed. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. The house wasn't extravagant. It wasn't designed to impress anyone. But it was mine. Chosen by me. Paid for with money that had always been meant to give me exactly this: stability, dignity, freedom. I ran my hand lightly across the countertop, feeling the smooth surface under my fingertips, grounding myself in something real. No more pretending. No more adjusting. No more asking for permission to exist. Everything that followed that day in the office had unfolded exactly as it needed to. The investigation didn't stay quiet. It couldn't. There were too many records, too many transactions, too many years of carefully hidden truth that couldn't stay buried once someone started looking closely enough. What Ethan had built wasn't just complicated, it was dependent on something fragile. Secrecy. And once that was gone, everything else followed. Accounts were frozen first, then reviewed, then exposed. Every purchase traced, every transfer documented, every decision examined under a light that didn't allow distortion. His business didn't collapse immediately. It unraveled.
Client withdrew.
Partners stepped back. Questions replaced confidence. And the version of success he had presented to the world began to look exactly like what it was. Constructed, dependent, borrowed from something that was never his. The legal process moved forward steadily. Not rushed, not delayed, just precise. The kind of precision that doesn't leave room for reinterpretation. He tried to negotiate.
Of course he did.
Offers came through, partial repayments, settlements, attempts to soften what couldn't be softened. Each one carefully framed, carefully worded, still trying to control the narrative. I didn't respond.
Not personally.
Everything went through the process. Through people who saw the situation clearly. Through systems that didn't bend for emotion. And eventually, the outcome became inevitable. Full restitution. Not just the original amount. Everything. The growth. The interest. The damages. Every year accounted for. Every decision acknowledged. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. And correction, I realized, doesn't need anger to exist. It just needs truth. Ethan accepted it in the end. Not willingly. Not gracefully. But completely. Because there was no version of events left where he could pretend otherwise. His life didn't disappear. But it changed. Radically. The house he lived in was sold. The lifestyle he maintained adjusted. The image he had built stripped down to something closer to reality. Lily left not long after. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just decisively. The same way everything else had ended. Their children moved with her. A different city. A different life. And just like that, the structure that had once looked so stable
was gone.
I thought I would feel something stronger about that. Anger. Satisfaction. Maybe even grief. But what I felt instead was distance. Not cold. Not bitter. Just clear. Because what had broken wasn't sudden. It had been breaking for years. I just hadn't seen it. Until I did. I walked into the living room, where the large windows overlooked the garden. It wasn't perfect. Still growing. Still uneven in places. But it was alive. And that mattered more than perfection ever had. There were small things now that filled my days. Things I used to overlook. Morning coffee without rushing. Walking outside because I wanted to, not because I had to go somewhere. Buying something without calculating what I would have to give up in return. These weren't luxuries. They were normal. And it took me 65 years to understand the difference. The phone rang from the table behind me. For a moment, I just listened to it. The sound no longer carried urgency, or fear, or obligation.
Just sound.
I walked over and looked at the screen. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then it stopped. A message followed.
Short.
Simple. Mom, I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to talk someday. I read it once. Then again. There was no anger in it.
No manipulation. No urgency.
Just a request. I placed the phone down gently. I didn't delete the message. But I didn't answer it either. Because some decisions don't need to be rushed. And some relationships don't return to what they were. They either become something new, or they remain closed.
Time would decide that.
Not guilt, not pressure.
Not history. Just time.
I stepped outside into the garden, the air warm, carrying the quiet hum of a world that continued regardless of what had happened before. I knelt slightly, adjusting a small plant that had leaned too far to one side, pressing the soil gently around it. It stayed, rooted, stable. That felt like something worth noticing. I stood up and looked around, at the house, at the space, at the life that no longer felt like something I had to justify. And I realized something simple. Nothing I had now was given to me.
Not really.
It had always been mine. It had just taken me years
to take it back.
The woman who once stood in front of that lake house, holding keys she didn't fully understand, questioning her worth, measuring herself against what she had been given. She was gone. Not erased. Not forgotten.
But changed.
Replaced by someone who didn't measure her value through comparison. Someone who didn't wait to be included. Someone who didn't accept silence as an answer. I walked back inside slowly, closing the door behind me, not out of fear, not out of habit, but out of choice. This space was mine. This life was mine. And whatever came next would be mine too. I glanced once more at the phone. The message still there, waiting, not demanding, just existing. I didn't move toward it.
Not yet.
Instead, I turned away, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by what I answered. I was defined by what I chose. And that was enough.